Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. Today we're taking a look at this WE knife. This is the WE 702. It was sent from Zelric42's channel for review, and I've got to say I am very grateful for him doing that because this is a knife I have really wanted to get my hands on for one particular reason, and that is it is an integral. Now, since having it and being able to mess with it a little bit, I've also learned that I absolutely love the way that they've done the lock bar insert and the pivot assembly. So both of those things, so for all of those reasons, I've been super excited to check this out, and I've got to say I'm pretty impressed by this knife overall. So let's go ahead and get into some of the specifics here. This knife is 8 7/8 inches overall, so just under 9 inches. Blade is 3 15/16, so 1/16 shy of 4 inches. Handle is 4 15/16, so again 1/16 shy of 5 inches. And the weight on this guy overall is 5.09 ounces. Now, 5 ounces is a little hefty, but for a knife of this size at almost 9 inches long, and for this construction with the integral handle, that's a pretty darn good weight. Okay, so I'm not going to complain about that at all. And in fact, in pocket, this carries really well. It's quite slim. Okay, so if you close the knife, there's not a lot here, and that really contributes to how comfortably this carries in pocket. It is really nice to carry, for sure. 5 ounces, it's probably a little heavy for, say, dress pants, but otherwise really well done. All right, so now let's move on from there to the blade. The blade is M390 drop point with a flat grind, a little bit of a high flat grind, some flats here, and then a swedge. Now I've got to say, I'm not a fan of this coating. WE calls this a hand rubbed satin finish, but this does not look like a hand rubbed satin finish that I've ever seen. In fact, I've even watched a couple reviewers who called it a bead blasted finish, which that's not what WE says about it. Now, let's see, where is it? Here is what I would consider a hand-rubbed satin finish. And when I put these two side by side, you can see a very distinct difference in these two. I definitely prefer this one an awful lot. Now, I don't dislike this finish, and it's certainly very sort of muted. So if you don't want your knife kind of glaring in the sunlight, maybe you would prefer this finish. And overall, this blade with M390 steel and this finish and this shape is quite good, but it's not as good as it could be. And that's where I want to talk about just a couple of little things here. The stock is 156 thousandths, and that's pretty thick for this knife. It's really nice and thin behind the edge, 17 thousandths behind the edge, which is awesome. And it does start cuts really well, like you would expect from a very thin edge. And you can tell how thin it is just by looking at the size of, I'm trying to get it to focus here by getting my fingers in there. Just by looking at the size of that secondary bevel, see how small it is? That's because there's very little metal down there behind the edge. The problem that I come across is the grind here, the height of it, means that you still get quite an abrupt angle when you're cutting through any kind of material. So if you're trying to cut up an apple or cut a piece of cheese, anytime you're moving through the material where you want a sort of a slicing type job, this knife doesn't do super well. And I don't know, that's a little disappointing to me, especially for the style of this knife. Like, to me, this does not feel like a knife I'm going to take out to the bush and abuse, and so it doesn't need that extra thick blade stock. Now, listen, if you're watching this, you are sworn to secrecy. You cannot tell Nick that I ever said this, because I often give him a hard time about this, but this is a knife where I'd actually like to see the blade stock just a little thinner. And those are words you will rarely ever hear come out of my mouth, but in this case, I actually would like to see slightly thinner blade stock. Or you could probably get around it, by the way. You could leave the blade stock as it is and do a full flat grind, and that would achieve at least a similar result, where you could flatten out that angle a little bit and make this cut just a little bit nicer. One last little issue with this blade, and you know, let me say this. I've used this, and I actually don't have any big problems with it other than food prep, but there are a couple other little things I want to say. Number one, I would like to see this swedge widened out a little bit so I have, you've got this thick blade stock. I'd like to have something a little more comfortable for my thumb back here if I want to choke up. The other thing is this large sharpening choil. Either, you know, carry it all the way back to here and make it just a small sharpening choil, or give me that extra 1/8 of an inch so I could actually use this for a finger choil. All right, but otherwise, guys, I am very impressed with this blade. I do like the shape overall. I think it ties into the knife, to the overall design of the knife very well. The steel, of course, is fantastic. It's nice and thin behind the edge. And for utility tasks, you know, opening packages, cutting rope, cutting cardboard, those kinds of things, it's gonna be just fine. It's just those more slicey tasks that it struggles a little. All right, now let's move on to what's really exciting about this knife, which is lockup and deployment. The action on this guy is very, very good. And I'm so happy to be able to say that now. The last few WE knives I've had have been good and consistent. You can probably remember that back when I was first getting some WE knives and being able to share them with you, I often complained that the detent was too soft, but they definitely seem to have sort of gotten that problem kind of dealt with, and you don't really see it too much anymore. And so, yeah, the action on this guy is dialed in. You've got ceramic bearings, ceramic detent, absolutely phenomenal on just the smoothness and the cleanness and crispness of that detent break. Just really, really nicely done. Now, while we're talking about this, let me point out here, they've got lock bar insert on this side of the lock, and the way they've done this is to cut it in and paint it the same color as the titanium, so it kind of hides it. It looks pretty good, but you can see there's a slight difference. The other thing that's perhaps most impressive is the way that they've achieved the pivot assembly here. So the way this works is if you take this screw out, you can take the pivot collar, which is this piece right here, off, and underneath is this other piece of titanium. Up here at the top is where it's holding in the stop pin that you can see right back here. Okay, so there's the stop pin, and you can see how this is holding it in. So literally the way you would disassemble this knife is it's literally just stacked up from the bottom to the top. You can take everything off, and that's awesome because this integrals are notoriously hard to disassemble, and if you're someone who likes to take apart and maintain your knives, they can be a real problem. But this is really, really elegantly solved, okay? So I've got to give WE a ton of credit for building this pivot the way that they have. It's an absolute achievement, and I hope that other companies will look at this and do something similar. It is very, very well done. While we're talking about the lock and deployment, just a brief note, I do like the way they've done this relief cut. They've got a series of cuts here, and it's not, and no one of them is super, super deep, so it gives you a little more strength. And I've often said this is the weak point in the knife here. I've seen lots of, you know, in the destruction videos you watch about frame locks, if they don't unlock, they fail right here. So it's nice to see that being just a little bit thicker and more robustly built. Let's flip it over to this side so we can take a look at that while we're talking here. So lockup and deployment, yeah, total win. I'm absolutely in love with the lockup and deployment on this knife. They've done a great, great job. Finally, the handle. Now we've already talked a little bit about construction because we talked about how the pivot was done, but check out the milling on this guy. Nicely 3D machined. You've got, of course, no line in the back because this is one solid piece of metal. Single position pocket clip that does work really well. Even with 511s, this goes in and out of pocket, no problem, although there's no way of remounting it to this side. Lanyard hole is pretty small, and I don't know how I feel about it. I could have actually done without this completely. I don't think it adds anything to the design, and it's so small that you're not going to get 550 cord through anyway, so I would have been happy to just do without it. All right, otherwise, very, very comfortable. Really, you know, I did have that one ergonomic comment where I'd like this to be a full choil, and it's not. Not the end of the world, because this knife is very, very comfortable in hand, and so I've got to give a lot of credit for that. They've really, yeah, this is just feels wonderful. And for a fairly slim knife, sometimes when they slim down the handle like this, which companies often do, and it makes the knife very carryable, they get them so small that they're not super comfortable in hand, but this one is definitely very, very easy to hang on to, very comfortable and very grippy. So the ergonomics, again, total win. So now we've got to talk about some comparisons. There are a number of comparisons here. The only other integral I have, or integral, depending on how you want that phrased, is the Lion Steel SR11. And this is probably one of the cheaper integral knives that you can get out there, and it's pretty well done except for the handle's a little too slick. In the titanium, this is still quite a bit more, at least $100 more than the WE. So this, of course, is aluminum, and if you want sort of just an integral, the cheapest budget integral you can find, this is probably about it. However, if you want the cheapest titanium integral, this guy is definitely the one, because all the others that I know of, you know, if you go with one of the ones from Riyat or Custom Knife Factory or you know, Peter Rezendi Custom or the Spyderco Nirvana, they're all going to be quite a bit more. This guy gets you an integral for a reasonable price and with quite a bit of variation. You know, the nice thing about WE knives, if you don't like the black with the bronze or gold hardware, there are probably 15 colors on Blade HQ right now that you can choose from, which is always appreciated. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into some other comparisons. I got you that one Lion Steel. I do have a couple of WE knives that are similar in size and shape. Here is my 604. I still think this is my favorite design of any WE knife. I love the blade on this knife. I pretty much post it every week on Instagram for Tanto Tuesday, because it is just absolutely gorgeous. Love the dragon scales on here. I keep thinking I'm going to get this pimped in some way, but I just never get around to it. We'll see. Maybe I'll just keep it like this forever. What else have we got? Oh, one other WE knife before we move into other companies. Here's the 618, and this is cool because it's slim and small, only weighs like under 4 ounces. I think it's just over 3 ounces, in fact. Similar in size, similar in overall design. Now, this is obviously a little more of a Quaken style blade, but if you like something slim and small, or long and slim, but don't want to carry 5 ounces, this is a full 2 ounces lighter. Really, really nicely done. The action is great. The only issue with this knife, and I have reviewed it, is the zero grind at the edge could be a little bit of a bear for sharpening, but it's not the end of the world at all. Let's throw in the ZT here. Now, there are a number of zero tolerance titanium frame locks, and the 0452 is going to be closest in sort of design and looks to this knife, but I want to throw in a full titanium zero tolerance because ZT does a great job. I mean, you're getting full 3D machine titanium here for like 220 bucks. Great, great knife. Look forward to my review of this knife coming up. I'm looking forward to doing it. I absolutely adore this knife. It is spectacular. So wanted to throw it in there. And I think in any sort of higher end titanium frame lock, if you're in that marketplace, you ought to be considering some ZTs. We also have on loan from Nick Shabazz the Kaiser Toro. Again, similar in size, a little heftier, but not that much. And so, yeah, if you're looking for something like this, there's another option for you. Finally, we'll bring in one last Chinese knife, and that is the Riyat Knives Torrent. The refinement on this is just a little higher. I do like Riyat knives just a little better than WE knives in terms of their overall fit and finish and the classiness of their designs and stuff like that. But again, you're going to be putting out a fairly substantial amount more money to go into the Riyat. All right, so there you go, guys. Those are some comparisons for you. I tried to kind of be as broad as I could there. So if you're interested in this knife, those are probably some other ones that you may want to take a look at or consider. My overall take on this knife, guys, what do I think? Is this a good knife, bad knife? Well, I think this is a pretty darn good knife. Yes, I complained a little bit about the grind on this blade or even the blade stock. Or, one way or another, it would be nice to see it a little bit thinner. But the reality is, for most EDC cutting tasks, if this was going to be your everyday carry pocket knife, 99% of what you're going to be cutting with this, you're absolutely fine. And there is a good argument to be made for that extra thick blade stock, adding a little bit of toughness and durability. The fit and finish is fantastic. The action is fantastic. The weight, the carry, the comfort in hand, everything is super good on this knife. And so I've got to say that I really, really like this. And if you're looking for an integral at a reasonable price, I mean, 300 bucks is still a lot, but compared to the other integrals that you'd be comparing it to, that's a pretty reasonable price. I think this is a great, great offering. Now, by the way, I want to say this. If you're watching, you're going to see a few WE knives reviewed reviewed. And if you're watching this and you've lent me some knives for review, bear with me. It is hunting season. So, you know, I'm usually in the bush from like 6 till 8 and then 4 till 6. And I'm trying to get into the office and get all my office work done, plus make a video or two during the day. And it's just not working as fast as I'd like. But deer season's over soon and things will speed up and I'll be able to get all your knives reviewed and back to you. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will talk to you soon.